He's the one that inspires people to remain each other and talk to each other.
He may be the most inspirational promo of the bunch so far, but
He does get the people fired up.
Yeah, at 7%, Jeff Jarrett.
Okay.
Does he inspire you? Are you inspired?
They didn't talk to the AEW fans on this one, apparently.
35% voted for others, including Otis, Mark Briscoe.
Well, wait a minute. Is Otis inspiring people? Oh, I gotta lose weight. I can't look like that.
I guess because he turned on Chad Gable, he wouldn't put up with the bullying anymore. I'm not sure. Mark Briscoe, Jessica Troy.
Actually, Mark Briscoe probably should be the person to win the thing, but nevertheless.
Jessica Troy.
He inspired people with the way that he almost came back.
The most popular wrestler of the year.
Okay.
With 28%. Any guesses?
If you go legitimately most popular, you have to be in a Roman Reigns, Cody Rhodes, CM Punk type of echelon, don't you?
With 28% of the vote, Cody Rhodes.
There you go.
The most popular wrestler of the year, coming in second place with 17%, Jey Uso.
Okay, and Jay. Forgot about that mass hypnosis.
Coming in third place with 8%, Joe Hendry.
That's Joe has a big family, 8%.
With 5%, Rhea Ripley.
Okay. I, with all due respect to Joe Hendry, how the fuck did he get more votes than a woman that's on television that is seen by multiple tens of times of, all right.
Is there a chance that the actual readership of PWI would skew more towards the smaller TNA fan base?
You think?
Because they champion TNA wrestlers than the wide WWE audience, but 42% voted for others.
If they knew who Grover Farquhar was a few minutes ago, I have a feeling they're following the smaller promotions.
42% voted for others, including Roman Reigns, LA Knight, Bryan Danielson, and Mark Briscoe. The most hated wrestler of the year. Any guesses?
Well, again, one would think it would be someone in the WWE, but is it? You can't really call Drew McIntyre hated. The Bloodline. Let's go with Solo.
44% voted for Dominic Mysterio.
Oh, forgot about Dominic.
Coming in second place, 10% for Solo Sikoa.
Okay.
7% for MJF, 6% for Logan Paul, 33.
Those 6% actually have met him personally.
33% voted for others, including Jack Perry, Chris Jericho, Liv Morgan, and Drew McIntyre.
Well, with Perry and Jericho, I think it's, we really hate these son of a bitches.
Feud of the year. Any guesses?
Oh, boy. Punk and Drew.
36% of the vote. CM Punk versus Drew McIntyre. Feud of the year.
There you go.
Second place, 17% for Adam Page versus Swerve Strickland. 16% for Liv Morgan versus Rhea Ripley. And 9% for Mariah May versus Toni Storm.
Okay, they're breaking this up. Okay, we give the WWE 2 and we give AEW 2, aren't they? Because how else
could
this be
suspicious? 22% voted for others, including Cody versus the Bloodline, NXT versus TNA, the Bloodline versus the Bloodline, and Effie versus Mance Warner. The bastard of the Warner family.
Please see, there was Jack, there was Harry, and there was that fucking. But again, no. You did the others, the Bloodline versus the Bloodline that carried a lot of business in the top company, but didn't quite place with Page and Swerve. All right.
The Indie Wrestler of the Year, 39% voted for Mustafa Ali.
Well, I said he should be on the Indies when we had to watch him in WWE.
20% voted for Matt Cardona. 8% voted for Mance Warner. 5% voted for Ali Catch. 28% voted for others, including Darius Carter, Shazza McKenzie, Hyan, and Cruel.
Hyan?
Hyan. Hyon?
and Cruel. Hyan and Cruel. Maybe that's a team.
Match of the year, Jim. What do you think is match of the year 2024?
Punk and Drew in Hell in a Cell.
35% voted for Roman Reigns versus Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania.
Oh, okay. I forget. It's only been 9 months. I forgot.
Speaking of 9% voted for second place. CM Punk versus Drew McIntyre, Hell in a Cell. Followed by 8% for Danielson versus Swerve. 7% for Danielson versus Ospreay. And then 41% voted for others. We won't go through those. Tag Team of the Year. Who do you give it to? Men and women.
None of the above.
25% voted for Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill.
Well, they've got a bright future.
Followed by 15% for the Young Bucks.
Oh, jeez.
10% for Fraxium.
Well, now hold on before we even get into that. If they hadn't have listed the Young Bucks, then Tony wouldn't talk to him anymore. Because you know that would create heat, so they had to be in there. And Fraxium?
That's the team of Axiom and Nathan Frazier. Fraxium.
Where? In their backyard? In their own
NXT.
home?
NXT.
Oh, Christ.
And 7% for the Judgment Day of Finn and JD. That's his name. 43% voted for other tag teams, including FTR, The System, The Unholy Union.
Who? What?
And DIY.
Who's the Unholy Union?
I'm not sure.
Sounds like some kind of fucking blind date that Heyman would be set up with.
Faction of the Year.
But so FTR didn't even nudge Fraxium off the chart there. Okay.
Faction of the Year. The Bloodline, 29%. Followed by the Wyatt 6 at 19%. The Judgment Day at 15%.
Where have they gone?
They're on SmackDown now.
We've been watching SmackDown.
Well, thankfully we haven't seen them. And maybe
That's what I'm saying. There
we should watch.
I thought better of that.
Judgment Day at 15%, and the Blackpool Combat Club / Death Riders at 13%. We go now to Woman of the Year. Any guesses on Woman of the Year?
Rhea Ripley.
25% have voted for Toni Storm. Woman of the Year, followed by 14%.
She's got magnesia. She can't remember anything. She's got complete magnesia. How can she be the Woman of the Year?
Followed by 14% for Liv Morgan, 13% for Rhea Ripley, 11% for Jordan Grace, and 37% for others, including Roxanne Perez, Mercedes Moné, Willow Nightingale, and Athena.
Athena, you hit me in the face with your big old ass and potato bean.
No, that's not how the song goes. It's Athena. I didn't know you were still wrestling. I haven't seen you. Wrestler of the Year. Any guesses on Wrestler of the Year?
Well, that's gotta be the Code Man, Cody Rhodes, carrying the company on his back like he has, being the biggest star in all the business.
And all these years, he's still out here. He's got a suit on in this photo. That tattoo is such a fucking mistake. 42%, Cody Rhodes, Wrestler of the Year, followed by Gunther at 11%, Will Ospreay at 8%, and Danielson at 7%.
2 and 2. It's always 2 and 2.
Other votes, 32% went for Swerve, Jordan Grace, Damian Priest, Jon Moxley, and Roman Reigns. Now these are just awards. The Stanley Weston Awards, Booker T, Mickie James, Gail Kim, and Dave Meltzer.
Oh, wait a minute. What? The Stanley Weston Award.
Weston, yes.
Yes.
That's why they get around the
Stanley
trademark
was
issues.
Italian. The Stanley Weston Award, is that for pissing people off? That's what he did before Apter came in and smoothed things over. All the fucking promoters hated Stanley Weston.
It's for lifetime achievement.
It took a long time to piss all those people off.
So Booker T, Mickie James, Gail Kim, and Dave Meltzer are now official Stanley Weston Award winners. And those are the PWI awards. Any thoughts?
Yes. Boy, the magazines have become outlaw to go along with the wrestling, haven't they?
It certainly seems.
But there used to be a plethora of big stars that you could make lists of, and it wouldn't sound goofy. But now they have to include people that almost nobody has heard of just to field a team there.
Well, that was the 2024 PWI Awards, and we'll stay in touch We'll keep on top of the other awards as they roll in. We've done the South Korean Awards and now the PWI Awards.
Yes, the awards just keep on coming. We're going to stay on top of all those positions they've got there on that magazine.
Jim, let's go to the files.
Uh-oh.
Let me grab all this. Of course,
Set the files down on the desk.
yeah, there's a few things here. Of course, from the files is where I go through the archives of the Wrestling News, Wrestling Review, Pro Wrestling Enterprises, and we talk about some of the interesting historical tidbits that we're able to find looking through the correspondence files of Pro Wrestling Enterprises.
Yes.
Does that sound correct?
Yes, that for one side you're doing it, and I'm saying yes, you have encapsulated that correctly.
Well, I think we have to start where we left off. I have Norm Keitzer's letter to Dave Meltzer.
Well, okay, you should mention that we have done From the Files Part 1 and Part 2 on Dave Meltzer because it is such a thick file, because when last we left our Space Travelers, Dave had written Norm Keitzer about a 4-page typewritten letter telling him what was wrong with his fucking magazine.
And that was dated September 5th, 1984. Here's Norman Keitzer's response, September 14th, 1984. David Meltzer, per your letter, first of all, here's the entry I plan to use in the Wrestling News number 114, which I am now working on. David Meltzer, I will not give his address in San Jose, sent us the September 10th issue of his Wrestling Observer Fan Club Bulletin. It consisted of 26 legal-sized pages with complete reports on virtually every major area, also some photos and clippings. Included were a lot of opinions from Dave and from his members. Dave charges $2 for a single issue or $13 for the next 6 issues.
$2 a piece or 13 for 6. How the fuck?
He promises a new bulletin every 3 weeks. Dave plus also, that's written weird, Dave plus also to put out a yearbook in mid-January that will cost $5 per copy.
Plans. Dave plans also.
Oh, that's what it is. He also asked that we again mention he is interested in trading videotapes, either VHS or beta, and is especially interested in obtaining Mid-South tapes. So after that whole letter, he starts on, by the way, here's your plug.
Yeah.
In the next issue.
Norm Keitzer was the most unconfrontational, not assertive or aggressive person. Probably good for Dave in that instance, because I was the first of all, motherfucker, but go ahead.
It is always best to write me a note. Just attach it to the bulletin when you change your frequency or price. I sometimes miss things like that, although I do attempt to read through every bulletin. Now, as to your other charge in your letter, that I make up facts to support my opinions. Basically, the things you take issue with me are on my opinions, clearly labeled by me as my opinions. On attendance, I have stated that WWF is outdrawing the AWA in San Francisco. That is not the case here in the Twin Cities. The first 2 WWF cards reported by Vince Jr. as sellouts drew less than half a house each at the Met Center. And once again, this is September 84. So they had just started going into Minnesota. They had Hogan, they had Mean Gene, David Schultz, but Verne wasn't dead right away.
No.
They had the Road Warriors. 84 was a strong year for them still. Their last card with Hogan and Okerlund versus Fuji and Steele, which they reported at 17,000 on TV, and you reported at 15,800, drew about half of that. After 3 rounds, the AWA drew clearly larger crowds the first 2 times and about the same the last time. On average ticket prices, from the information I have, which I admit is not a complete compilation of all tickets sold, as I don't think anyone has all the figures from every card promoted, I believe that the average WWF ticket price is higher than that of other promotions. On Japan and Hogan, first of all, I don't hate Hogan. While I do have some lack of respect for wrestlers who cut interviews for one promotion, saying that they will appear on a card and then jump to McMahon, I think that the primary reason they have done this is that McMahon feels getting someone to come over to him in that way is the way he can most damage the opposition. Nothing wrong there.
Yeah.
If Hogan, Ventura, Junkyard Dog, and others do that, you can't blame them for making a decision that they think will make more money for themselves. But I think the long run is that McMahon is doing more damage to the sport of wrestling as a whole than he is damaging his individual competitors. And that a lot of people he has made promises to are going to end up not getting what they were promised. Let me stop there for a moment. What do you think of his insights into the state of wrestling in '84?
Well, the thing is, Norm Keizer had dealt with promoters and been around a lot of these guys, especially in Minnesota, but all over the country for a period of 15 years or more at that point. And he dealt with Vince. He printed and produced the programs for Vince Sr. for years, from the mid to late 70s to the early 80s, when Vince Jr. banned everybody and took their stuff in-house. So he already had an inkling of how these people operated, and that was his opinion of what Vince was doing. And he turned out to be right.
And again, the idea that he doesn't hate Hogan, but he has a lack of respect for people that walk out on the promoters they were doing promos for. You were there when Junkyard Dog did exactly that.
Yeah, and Norm Keizer was up there in Minnesota when Hogan did it for all those towns, and then didn't come back from Japan, went to work for Vince. And it does hurt, and it hurts the wrestling business in the way that Norman is talking about from a business perspective, especially back then. Fans, they didn't give a fuck what promotion, they were going to see wrestling. And if you go to see a wrestling show and you buy a ticket and one of the main people, or more than one of the main people on the card that you went to see, doesn't show up, then the next time, instead of thinking, oh, I got to go back and see some more of that, the last time they got to show up. And that's the way he's talking about damaging the business, because that sentiment will spread, the more often that it happens. And it wasn't, the wrestling business and the fans didn't look at it then like they do now, where the fans now, they don't even know who's going to be on the fucking card. They go, oh, we're going to go see Dynamite or Raw or whatever. In that era, they read the entire card that you were going to see at the house show on television, and goddamn it, down to the first match, and those things better happen that way. And people got mad when they didn't.
Well, back to Norm Keizer's response to Dave Meltzer. On Japan, there's been a lot of 1984 style statements made there by New Japan, McMahon, Shinma, and everybody connected with WWF during the past 2 years, telling the people basically one week that black is black, and then the next that black is white. Let's go back and look at things. 2 years ago, when Titan and New Japan left the NWA, they announced the first Grand Prix tournament to name an undisputed World Heavyweight Champion. They made these announcements in both the US and Japan. The tournament was to culminate with the finals in Japan, with the winner of the competition to meet Backlund at MSG for the undisputed World Heavyweight Championship. McMahon Sr. appeared at the opening of the finals in Japan and repeated that basic statement. Then Hogan won, but no match was scheduled. Hogan came to the US and wrestled on AWA and NWA cards, had World Heavyweight Championship title matches in each organization in which he failed to win those claims. Then he went to MSG earlier this year and won the WWF title, making him undisputed champion according to Junior's statements. Both Titan and New Japan recognize him as the World Heavyweight Champion. Then we had the fiasco when Junior tried with Shinma to start a separate WWF promotion in Japan. That's the UWF, if you remember. I heard so many conflicting statements on that and on the UWF that I don't know what the true story is. In fact, the true story probably changed from day to day as everyone seemed to be double-crossing everyone else involved constantly. Anyway, the end came with McMahon Jr. saying New Japan was back as a WWF member. The New Japan promotion announced a second Grand Prix competition with the winner to meet Hogan for the World Heavyweight Championship. Nothing was said at that point about there being two separate titles, a WWF World Heavyweight title and a Grand Prix World Heavyweight title. Now they and you are saying there are two separate titles and that Hogan only lost the Grand Prix World Heavyweight Championship to Inoki. The descriptions of that bout are also somewhat confused with interference and countouts, but in the end, Inoki was declared the winner and the champion in Japan. From what I have heard, I can see several reasons why a title would not change hands in that bout and why it would. I thought I covered them, but I didn't ignore the bout in my magazine. So let me stop there for a moment, Jim, and take a pause. What are your thoughts on him defending himself here?
Well, and he's trying to be nice as he could, because remember when we read, and we encourage anybody who didn't hear the first segment, go to the YouTube channel and the clip is up. But he's trying to be as reasonable as possible as he could to Dave, who, as you will recall, we said, what is this fucking, why is he telling this shit to Norm Keitzer, who don't give a shit? He's just trying to sell some magazines. He doesn't care about these minute fucking complaints that Dave has brought up, and now he has to go through and explain his rationale to a guy that he's given plugs to for a fucking newsletter. I think he's bending over backwards to be understanding to the guy that said his magazine sucked, which by the time Dave had never published anything that didn't come out on copy paper. And he's talking to a guy that at least had run a magazine.
You also fault me on the junior title, saying that Tiger Mask was undisputed World Junior Heavyweight Champion when he retired. And I agree. So that New Japan had right to create a new WWF Junior Heavyweight Champion with a tournament, which they did with Dynamite Kid winning, which I'll agree to. But how could they run a separate elimination for an NWA World Junior Heavyweight Championship with the Cobra winning when they were no longer members of the NWA and was sanctioned by the NWA? The NWA itself gave the title back to Les Thornton. Now, I believe the NWA says the title is vacant and there'll be a tournament. I agree that all acted badly here and that wrestling in general, especially here in the U.S., does not do a good job of promotion, the junior division, of promoting the junior division as a separate entity. A lot more wrestlers did more back and forth between promotions before Junior attempted to take over everything. Even McMahon Sr. showcased wrestlers from other areas off and on. He even had NWA and AWA title matches on his cards. I guess that's defending. Remember, Dave had a problem with Norm Keitzer saying wrestlers could go from one territory to another?
Yeah. And also, as Norm points out, Vince Sr. not only had the pipeline to Florida with Eddie Graham, where he had Florida guys guest starring at the Garden and making the shots every now and then, and Dusty on a kind of a regular basis, but also he brought the Funks in. Dory Funk Sr. and shortly before he died wrestled in Madison Square Garden. Vince Sr. would bring the top talent in from other territories, when he was a member of the NWA, other promoters that he would work with and give their talent a showcase in the Garden, but also it made the Garden look different than every other town in his territory because that was the place where stars came from all over the world.
And as the topic of Japan is concerned, it was a big deal in Japan. MSG, they had MSG tournaments for years.
And apparently just the tournament winner didn't go on to get the title shot that he earned.
Well, the problem is if you're trying to logically follow what they're saying and they just change things, what are you supposed to do if you're reporting on it?
Yeah.
My point on Hogan is that he did lose to others the first time in the WWF area, the ones I mentioned, and that logical matches would be against those challengers who faced him before. Both Flair and Martel have faced a larger variety of challengers, both in numbers and styles, than has Hogan. This is not the fault of Hogan, and I don't say it because I dislike him. I say it as a comment on Junior, who has declared war on me, not the other way around. We turn the page, and of course, Norm Kietzer was the producer of World Wrestling Federation, WWF, and WWF programs from the early 70s until 1983. Vince wanted him to only cover his company. Norm Kietzer said no way, and that began Vince's journey to building his own magazine.
Yeah, and that's when he banished the people from the After magazines, London Publishing, the former Stanley Weston publications, and all photographers for many magazines except the ones in-house with Vince were banned for a while there. So then all the shots in PWI and the wrestler and all that was like with a telephoto lens from the stands.
I go to wrestling matches to be entertained, and Junior's cards just are not as good as the other cards. Part of this being because even though he doesn't lack talent, he doesn't use the talent he has well or in enough variety of ways. Basically, the next Twin City card is a main event for the WWF of Hogan and Mad Dog Vachon versus Jesse Ventura and George Steele. Ventura has had so many different confrontations with the other two here over the years, and Steele is a part-timer who doesn't do that much other than stick out his green tongue at this point in his career. I think very strongly that the new talent in the AWA these days, the Fabulous Ones, the Road Warriors, Brody, Atlas, etc., is better than the talent the AWA lost to the WWF. Certainly more entertaining as it is presented here in Minnesota.
Can you imagine Hulk Hogan and Mad Dog Vachon as a tag team? Mad Dog's 5'7", Hulk's 6'7". Hulk was not even 35 years old then. Mad Dog was close to 60. Mad Dog could have torn Hulk Hogan to shreds within seconds with his bare hands and eaten him. What a fucking tag team.
The idea that they lost Hogan, they lost Mean Gene, David Schultz. By this point in time, they'd even lost Al DeRusha for a period of time. Lots of people, and it wouldn't end here. Norm Kietzer, a lifelong AWA fan, although he lived in New York for a time, saying that the Road Warriors, the Fabulous Ones, Brody, etc., coming in, the talent's better. Again, 84, the AWA did not die in 1984. But what do you think of this? Because you saw the Fabulous Ones before they got there.
Well, and I mean, he's right in that Mad Dog was an icon and was a huge star, but at that point, age had caught up with him. And George Steele, Minnesota was not the venue for George Steele. He had been primarily a WW and WWF guy and a Detroit guy because he lived in Detroit. He taught school for all those years. He didn't start wrestling all year round and give up the school teaching until the early 80s when he could make enough money to in the Northeast to make the difference. But it wasn't a Minnesota thing. And then when you've got the Fabulous Ones and the Road Warriors and those guys who were so much younger and so much fresher, even though Mad Dog was an icon, Jesse was an icon in the AWA at that point, Hogan had drawn big money. it was an odd slapped together thing based on personalities that were over rather than an issue per se. So, and that's, we talked about that. That's why the Crusher didn't work in Georgia in 1979, because he didn't have 20 years of history like he did in the AWA, and they were just seeing this guy in his 50s with a Beatle haircut.
Let's go back to Norman Kietzer. That is my opinion. I go to cards for entertainment. The same reason I attend events of other professional sports, football, baseball, etc. In my opinion, colored by many influences, I admit, the AWA is the better promotion here. Time will tell if enough ticket buying fans agree with me. And who knows what changes will be made by both organizations in the future. You certainly have a right to your opinions, and I plug all publications who ask for free ad space in my magazine, whether I agree with all the opinions held by the person putting out the bulletin or not. Is that Norm's nice way of saying I think all
I think you're full of shit, but I'm going to plug you anyway because I'm a nice guy.
I don't tell you to give up your opinions or claim that I am always right, or you are always wrong when we disagree. And I do always try to label my opinions as that, my opinion. I don't even rate wrestlers, as I have stated for some 20 years, that ratings are simply opinions that are not valid. Stop there for a second. Considering all we talk about with Dave's ratings, I don't rate wrestlers. As I've always said, ratings are opinions that are not valid.
Yes, and he never had ratings in the wrestling news or Ring Wrestling or whatever, only under Ring Wrestling did under a different editorship.
And that although I think I know as much about the sport as any who do publish so-called official ratings, my opinions would be no more valid than theirs. In short, I don't try to foist off my opinions as being the ultimate truth, but at the same time, I don't try to hide my opinions and claim to be an unbiased reporter, a unique and probably extinct species in that I've never encountered same in any publication on any subject, if such a thing existed. I do tend to go on and on when I write, so I'll close, and it's signed by Norman, but we have a P.S. P.S. One last self-serving point. Whether the other promotions always spent a great deal of time on their television programs talking about what is happening elsewhere or not, in the case of the AWA, Mid-South, and some NWA promotions, they do allow the wrestling news, which covers wrestling everywhere, to be sold at their matches, and don't attempt to make people believe that the other promotions don't exist. That, when compared to a promoter who says that he is going to run me out of business because I refuse to cover only his promotion in my national magazine, that may have a tendency to make my feelings towards that individual less generous than I am towards others. My quarrel specifically is with Vince McMahon Jr. because of actions which he has taken against me, which I have elaborated on in my magazine, not against everyone who works for him. And there's Norm defending his coverage of Vince McMahon of the WWF from Dave, who bizarrely started defending Vince McMahon of the WWF. Any thoughts?
And again, at the age of 24, doing a newsletter on copy paper, telling the guy who's been doing a magazine for 20 years what's wrong with his magazine. Now, admittedly, it wasn't the goddamn heyday of Time, Norm's publication, but it was, at least it had some color on the cover. The gall of Dave even then to be writing letters and telling these people, well, you ought to do this and that and the other thing. Well, shut the fuck up.
Well, we'll close from the files with this last letter. This was post-dated July 11th, 1986 from Dave Meltzer in California to Norm Kietzer. So after the previous one. Norm, I would be interested in writing a column for your mag in exchange for an advertisement in the magazine, or being allowed with a regular column to plug the Observer and book that's coming out soon. I'd really like to do a regular column concerning Japanese wrestling.
Oh, good Lord.
But if you have another idea of a column I could do for you, let me know. Thanks. I will have a special 150 to 160 page issue out on August 1st for $15. It will have profiles of about 330 wrestlers with age, career background, and real names.
And it'll also have 14 pages telling you what you ought to do with your magazine.
So even after all that, he still wanted to write a Japanese column in 1986.
Well, again, Norm Kaiser, in various magazines that he published, would have pictures from Japan or Japanese news. It wouldn't be the majority of the magazine, and most of the pictures he would try to have some American talent in the picture, because he was still selling to an American audience. Can you imagine if Dave was writing a column on strictly Japanese wrestling, and we've seen the way that he does it with just the names and who beat who, and sell that on the fucking newsstand in Chicago or Ottumwa, Iowa, and people are going, what the fuck? It's not the same market. Norm was going for wrestling fans in the United States of America, where he sold his magazine. It wasn't any slight against the Japanese folks that he didn't cover to cover embrace it.
And you got more coverage of Japanese wrestling there than any other magazine in America.
Well, yeah, because all the Bill Apter magazines, the London Publishing that were on the newsstands, except if a big American star went to Japan, they might have pictures of that, or if a big Japanese star came to the Garden or wherever. But otherwise, there was no coverage of what was going on in Japan.
Well, Jim, that was From the Files, Part 3 of Dave Meltzer. There'll be a Part 4 someday, but we'll move on to another topic for the next edition of From the Files. But Jim,
Yes,
we have a very new friend to tell the listeners about here today.
yes, we do, and I'll tell you what, it's our friends over at Dose. And that's not Spanish for two. That's Dose as in D-O-S-E, because Brian, I've just started to learn about this, just like you, from our friends at Dose. And I'll lead with the main point. Did you know that the liver is the second largest organ in your body? Or if you're Robert Fuller or Milton Berle, the third largest organ in your body, but still it is responsible for over 500 functions. But liver health does not get the attention it deserves. When's the last time you turned on the TV or opened up a newspaper and the headline was, how's your liver?
I can't remember that headline, no.
That's right, because it's being overlooked. Over 30% of Americans have a sluggish liver, a problem that goes undetected until the very last minute. And then somehow, maybe through excruciating pain or projectile bleeding from the rectum, then it's called attention to. Well, Dose and our friends over there are on a mission to educate us on why it's important to maintain your liver health. Because you will quiver if there's something wrong with your liver. Just like it will behoove you to care for your uvula, folks. If you let your liver go, well, fuck, that's your filter. The liver cleanses unwanted elements from your body, and it aids in digestion, and Dose was formulated to help the liver. And so you need to flush down all of that stuff. You need to break down what you consume into the essential nutrients, and then have the other shit slammed into that colon and right out of there. The liver.
Credit card debt, just like that. We're routinely helping our listeners save $500, $600, $700, even $800 a month. And you don't need perfect credit or money out of your pocket to do this, but check this out. No house payments for 2 months at SaveWithConrad.com. And our number 2129 Equal Housing Lender. SaveWithConrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Grilling JR with the voice of professional wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross. Jim, how are you, man?
I'm pretty good. I'm trying to get rid of this big snowstorm here in Jacksonville, and the city is panicking. They don't have equipment to take care of the roads. My housekeeper's scared to death to get out of her house. She ain't here today. She's supposed to come on Tuesdays. Not here. So it is what it is. In Jacksonville Beach. It's going to be interesting to see the snowfall on the beach. I've never seen that, I don't think. You, Conrad, you seen that before?
No, man, it's happening right now at my place in Pensacola. And we got some friends down there who are sending me stuff. They're doing snowball fights on the beach, which feels surreal. It's a crazy time in the world here. And it's a crazy time to be a wrestling fan because JR is headed across the pond.
I am.
Inside the Ropes is thrilled to announce yet another tour with the voice of professional wrestling, good old JR. The WWE Hall of Famer is going to sit down with Inside the Ropes and tell his stories on stage in the UK. And each night, JR is going to go through lots of big moments, matches, and memories from his time in the WWE, plus a whole lot more. And of course, no Inside the Ropes live show would be complete without the VIP experience that Inside the Ropes is known for. So before each show, JR is going to be doing photo ops and signing autographs, and this is going down on January 30th in London, on January 31st in Manchester, and on February 1st in Glasgow. And all your ticket information is available right now at itrwrestling.com. Jim, we had a blast with Kenny McIntosh and his crew a few years ago, right before the pandemic. I'm glad you're getting to make another one of these. And as you said last week, hey, this might be the last one, right?
Well, you never know. You know, I'm 73 now. I know I don't look it.
Not at all. Not at all.
But I'm excited to go back. I'm not excited about the flight. It's Jacksonville to Dallas, Dallas to London, and so it's be sleepy time for JR. Maybe an edible or two will put me down.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. I miss the Tide in the football playoffs, Conrad. There's teams that didn't get there, and the game kind of disappointed me. I was born in a Catholic hospital. That's about the size of my Catholic relationship. But I thought I picked Ohio State to win. But I thought, boy, this is missing something. And it was missing Alabama. And now they're talking that the Big Ten, which is ridiculous, because they're not 10. There's how many fucking teams are in the Big Ten? Like 20. But they're saying now that the top conference in college football is no longer the SEC. It is the Big Ten. And I have a hard time agreeing with that.
Yeah, well, I would disagree with that too. I mean, I think 4 of the top 6, even in basketball right now, are SEC. But that's the story for another day. The story right now is if you're listening across the pond, go grab those tickets. itrwrestling.com, January 30th in London, January 31st in Manchester, and February 1st in Glasgow. If you've never been to one of Kenny McIntosh's Inside the Rope shows, I encourage you, go out of your way to go see this one. Jim's going to deliver the goods. He's going to tell you stories that, well, he has never told before and he can't tell anywhere else. To be honest with you, as JR would say, he's got a lot of F's to give. So he's going to drop some nuggets on you that maybe he would have played close to the vest. He just did that a few weeks ago with the whole Sonny bombshell. And, you know, when that all happened years ago, you and I were friendly and you told me about it, but I was sort of shocked you brought it up on the show. But hey, listen, you're letting some of these secrets out, and people are going to hear things at these Inside the Rope shows that you've never said before, Jim.
Yeah, they kind of it gets out there. You know, you're. Oh, what about? Well, here's your story. The stories are all created by the audience. Whatever they want to talk about is what I will talk about. Q&As are stimulating. I love to do the photo ops before the show and sign the autographs, sign their stuff, and that's cool. So it's a big package deal. Before the show starts, we'll do some Q&A, or excuse me, we'll do the photo ops, autographs, and all that good stuff. I enjoy that. And the UK fans are very knowledgeable, and they'll bring up stuff that I hadn't thought about in years, which stimulates my brain to telling a story about it. There's nothing they can ask me that won't relate to a story that connects it. So it's, there's a method to the madness, I guess you would say. And, but it's gonna be fun, a lot of laughs, a lot of, oh, I didn't know that type stuff. So it'll be good. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to having a full English breakfast at least twice. Cause I like beans for breakfast.
Oh,
They
boy.
They have those beans for breakfast. I enjoy that. And they also have eggs. But I enjoy the, big English breakfast. It's good stuff. So, and we're staying in a hotel that's got a restaurant. I didn't check that out. I hope so. It's funny what you think about when you're traveling. Does the hotel have a restaurant? Are we staying in a dipshit, you know, just go lay down, go to sleep, forget about it? I like to have breakfast. And, we'll see how it works out. I'll have a full report later.
Can't wait to hear about that hotel breakfast. Go hear the rest of JR stories right now at itrwrestling.com. And Jim, it's not just this international tour that you've got on the books, but on March 7th, before we know it, the Queen of the Ring is going to be in theaters.
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited about this. We now know that, man, what a cast of characters. Jack Pfeffer, if you're not familiar with that name, boy, he was one of the more interesting figures in wrestling history. And he's played by one of my favorite actors in this movie, Walton Goggins. We've also got Camille W. playing June Byers.